"You don't belong in this cabin." Those were the last words Captain Sterling should have ever said. He saw a young black woman in a hoodie sitting in seat 1A and assumed she was a stowaway. He didn't check the manifest. He didn't ask her name. He just let his prejudice take the wheel. When he raised his hand and slapped her across the face in a fit of rage, he thought he was protecting the airline's prestige. He had no idea that the woman he just assaulted wasn't just a passenger. She was Nia Vance, the silent billionaire financing the very jet he was flying. And before this flight lands, Captain Sterling is going to learn that gravity isn't the only thing that brings a man down hard. The rain battered against the reinforced glass of Terminal 4 at JFK International Airport, creating a blurred mosaic of grey and steel outside. Inside the exclusive Meridian Air First Class lounge, the atmosphere was a stark contrast, hushed, golden, and smelling faintly of bergamot and old money. Nia Vance adjusted the hood of her oversized charcoal grey cashmere sweatshirt. To the untrained eye, she looked like a college student who had rolled out of bed late for a flight. She wore no makeup, her hair was pulled back in a simple bun, and her sneakers, though limited edition and costing more than most people's rent, looked scuffed and well-worn. She sat in a high-back leather wing chair, sipping a sparkling water, her eyes scanning a document on her tablet. She wasn't just anyone. At 26, Nia was the youngest venture capitalist in the tech sector, having quietly amassed a fortune through algorithmic trading software before pivoting to aerospace investments. She was the ghost in the machine, the silent backer who had recently injected $300 million into Meridian Air to save it from bankruptcy. But nobody knew her face. She preferred it that way. Final boarding call for flight MA 880 to London Heathrow, the soft chime announced. Nia stood up, shouldering her battered leather backpack. She moved toward the gate, bypassing the long line of economy passengers and heading straight for the priority lane. Standing at the podium was a gate agent named Sarah, who looked exhausted. Beside her, however, stood a man who radiated an aura of impatient superiority. He was tall, silver-haired, with the 4 gold stripes of a captain on his immaculate navy epaulets. This was Captain Richard Sterling. A veteran of the skies, Sterling was known for 2 things: his flawless landing record and his archaic, often cruel, attitude toward anyone he deemed below the standard of his airline. As Nia approached the counter, Sterling looked up from a manifest he was signing. His blue eyes narrowed instantly as they swept over her hoodie and sneakers. "Excuse me, miss." Sterling's voice was a low rumble, cutting off Sarah before she could scan Nia's boarding pass. "Economy boarding is lane 2. You're blocking the premier path." Nia didn't flinch. She held out her phone with the QR code displayed. "I know where I'm going. I'm in 1A. Sterling let out a short, incredulous laugh. He stepped out from behind the podium, crossing his arms. He loomed over her, using his height to intimidate. 1A? That's a first-class suite, young lady. That seat costs $12,000 one way. Now, I don't know if you're confused or if you're trying to pull a fast one for a TikTok challenge, but let's not waste my time. Move to lane 2. "Check the ticket," Nia said, her voice calm, devoid of the anger that was starting to spark in her chest. Sarah, the gate agent, reached for the scanner. "Captain, I can just verify." "No, Sarah," Sterling snapped, not looking at her. His gaze remained fixed on Nia. "We have high-value clients boarding today. Lord Harrington is expected any minute. I will not have the cabin cluttered with riffraff trying to sneak upgrades. It lowers the tone. Nia lowered her phone slowly. The air around them seemed to drop a few degrees. Riffraff? She repeated softly. Captain, my name is Nia Vance. I purchased that seat. If you deny me boarding, you are violating federal aviation regulations and company policy. I am the captain, Sterling sneered, leaning in closer, his breath smelling of strong coffee and mints. On this ship, I am the policy. And my policy is that first class is for the elite, not for girls in hoodies who look like they're running from a shoplifting charge. A few passengers in the priority line behind Nia gasped. An older woman in pearls clutched her handbag tighter, whispering to her husband. Nia held Sterling's gaze. She saw the bigotry swimming in his eyes, ancient and ugly. She could have called the CIO of Meridian Air, David Thorne, right then and there. She had his personal cell number on speed dial. She could have ended Sterling's career before he even stepped onto the jet bridge. But Nia was a strategist. She played the long game. She wanted to see how deep the rot went. Scan the code, Nia said, thrusting the phone toward the scanner in Sarah's hand before Sterling could stop her. Beep. The machine flashed green. Seat 1A, Vance, Nia. Premier status, infinite. Sarah's eyes widened. She looked at the screen, then at Nia, then at the captain. Captain, it's valid. It's an infinite status ticket. That's higher than platinum. Sterling's face flushed a deep, ugly red. He snatched the boarding pass receipt that printed out, staring at it as if it were a forgery. He couldn't deny the computer, but his ego was already bruised, and a bruised ego in a man like Richard Sterling was dangerous. He crumpled the receipt slightly before shoving it into Nia's hand. Don't think this means you belong there, he hissed, his voice low so only she could hear. I'll be watching you. One toe out of line, one disturbance, and I will have you removed and arrested faster than you can blink. You might have scammed the system, but you can't scam me. Nia took the crumpled paper, smoothed it out against her chest, and smiled. A cold, sharp smile that didn't reach her eyes. Have a safe flight, Captain. She walked past him, down the jet bridge. Sterling watched her go, his jaw clenched so tight a vein throbbed in his temple. He turned to Sarah. Alert the cabin crew. Tell them to keep a close eye on 1A. I don't trust her. If she asks for so much as an extra nut mix, I want to know. The cabin of the Boeing 737-300ER was a masterpiece of modern luxury. The first-class suites were enclosed pods with sliding privacy doors, lie-flat beds, and 24-inch 4K screens. Nia settled into seat 1A, tossing her backpack into the overhead bin. A flight attendant named Jessica approached. She was young, blonde, and clearly nervous. She had evidently already received the captain's warning. May I take your coat, Ms. Vance? Jessica asked, her hands trembling slightly as she held a tray of champagne. No coat, just the hoodie. I'm fine, thank you, Nia said politely. Actually, could I get a glass of sparkling water with lime? No ice. Of course, Jessica said, rushing off. Nia reclined the seat. She could hear the other passengers boarding. To her right, in 1B, was a man in a bespoke Italian suit, typing furiously on a BlackBerry. A relic, but a sign of a specific type of old-school power. This was Lord Harrington, the man Sterling had been so worried about offending. 10 minutes later, the plane was fully boarded. The safety demonstration played. The hum of the engines grew to a roar as they pushed back from the gate. Nia closed her eyes, ready to endure the 7-hour flight and deal with Sterling's behavior via a formal board inquiry once they landed. But Sterling wasn't done. 40 minutes into the flight, the seatbelt sign was turned off. The cabin crew began the meal service. The smell of warmed truffle oil and roasted duck filled the cabin. Nia had her laptop open, reviewing the quarterly financial reports for Billionaire. The numbers were grim. Fuel costs were up, customer satisfaction was down, and staff morale was in the toilet. She was highlighting a section on leadership failures when a shadow fell over her tray table. She looked up. It wasn't Jessica. It was Captain Sterling. He shouldn't have been there. Pilots rarely left the cockpit during cruise unless it was for a bathroom break, and certainly not to harass passengers. But Sterling had put the relief pilot in charge. He had an itch he couldn't scratch. He simply couldn't believe this girl in a hoodie could legitimately afford this seat. "Comfortable?" Sterling asked, his voice dripping with sarcasm. He stood in the aisle, hands on his hips, speaking loud enough for the surrounding pods to hear. Nia closed her laptop slowly. "Is there a problem, Captain? Shouldn't you be flying the plane?" "The plane is on autopilot. I'm here to ensure the integrity of my cabin," Sterling said. He gestured to her laptop. "That's a proprietary company document on your screen. I saw the logo. Meridian Air Internal Financials." Nia raised an eyebrow. "You have sharp eyes." "Where did you steal that?" Sterling demanded, his voice rising. "That is confidential corporate data. You're hacking our network." "I'm reading a PDF, Captain. I didn't steal anything." "Liar," Sterling barked. Lord Harrington, in 1B, lowered his newspaper, watching the scene with rapt attention. "You come on my plane looking like a street thug. You sit in a seat you clearly didn't pay for. And now you're accessing sensitive airline data? I'm on to you. You're a corporate spy or a journalist looking for dirt. I advise you to lower your voice," Nia said, her tone hardening. "You are making a scene and embarrassing yourself." "I'm embarrassing myself?" Sterling laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "I am the authority here. Hand over the laptop. Now, I am confiscating it as evidence of cybercrime aboard a federal aircraft." "No," Nia said firmly. Sterling's face turned purple. He reached into the pod, grabbing Nia's arm. "Don't touch me," Nia warned, pulling her arm back. "Resisting a flight crew member's instructions is a felony," Sterling shouted. He lunged forward, trying to snatch the laptop from her tray table. Nia was quick. She grabbed the laptop and pulled it to her chest. In the scuffle, her elbow knocked over the glass of sparkling water. The liquid splashed onto Sterling's pristine uniform trousers. The cabin went dead silent. Sterling looked down at the wet spot on his pants. He looked back up at Nia. The rage in his eyes was no longer professional. It was personal. It was primal. "You little..." Whack! The sound was like a gunshot in the pressurized cabin. Sterling's open palm connected hard with Nia's cheek. The force of the slap knocked her head back against the leather headrest. Her glasses flew off, skittering across the floor. Jessica, the flight attendant, screamed from the galley. "Captain!" Lord Harrington stood up in his pod. "I say, that is enough!" Nia sat frozen for a second, her cheek burning, a metallic taste of blood in her mouth where her tooth had cut her lip. She slowly turned her head back to face him. Her eyes were no longer calm. They were cold, dead voids. Sterling stood there, breathing heavily, his hand still raised slightly. He seemed to realize just for a fraction of a second, that he had crossed a line. But his arrogance rushed in to fill the gap. "She assaulted a flight officer," Sterling announced to the stunned cabin, pointing a shaking finger at her. "She threw water on me. I acted in self-defense to restrain an unruly passenger." He looked at Jessica. "Get the restraints. We are diverting. I'm having her arrested." Nia touched her cheek. She looked at the blood on her fingertips. "You aren't diverting anywhere," Nia said. Her voice was barely a whisper, but it carried a weight that made the air feel heavy. "Excuse me?" Sterling scoffed. Nia reached into the pocket of her hoodie. Sterling flinched, perhaps thinking she had a weapon. She pulled out a card. It wasn't a credit card. It was a matte black metal card with a gold chip and the Meridian Air logo embossed in diamond dust. It was the chairman's override key, a specific ID issued to only 5 people in the world: the CEO, the COO, and the 3 majority shareholders. She held it up. "Go to the cockpit," Nia said, her voice shaking with controlled rage. "Get on the satellite phone. Call David Thorne. Tell him Nia Vance is on board, flight 880. Sterling stared at the card. He didn't recognize it. He was a pilot, not a board member. "I don't know what that fake toy is, but—" "Call him!" Nia roared. It was the first time she had raised her voice. It was a command of absolute authority. Lord Harrington, leaning over the divider, adjusted his monocle. Metaphorically speaking, he was squinting. "Captain, that looks like a board director's credential. I've seen Thorne carry one." Sterling hesitated. The seed of doubt had been planted, but he had just slapped a passenger. If he backed down now, he was finished. If he doubled down, he might survive if he could prove she was dangerous. "You're staying in this seat until the marshals drag you off," Sterling spat. He turned on his heel and stormed back toward the cockpit, slamming the reinforced door behind him. Jessica rushed to Nia's side with a bag of ice and a towel. "Oh my God, Miss Vance, I am so sorry. I didn't know he would—" "Are you okay?" Nia took the ice, pressing it to her swelling cheek. "Jessica, right?" "Yes, Mom." "Jessica, I need you to do exactly as I say. Do not serve any more alcohol to the captain. Keep the cabin calm, and bring me the flight phone." The satellite phone?" "Yes. The one in the galley. I need to make a call." Jessica nodded frantically and ran to the galley. Nia looked out the window at the clouds stretching to the horizon. She wasn't sad. She wasn't scared. She was calculating the exact blast radius of the explosion she was about to detonate. The first-class cabin was vibrating with a heavy, suffocating silence. The kind of silence that usually follows a car crash. Every passenger in the first 4 rows was wide awake, their noise-cancelling headphones pulled down around their necks, eyes fixed on seat 1A. Nia sat rigidly. The ice pack Jessica had provided was pressed against her left cheek, which was already swelling into an angry, violet bruise. Her lip was still bleeding sluggishly. She tasted the iron tang of it, and strangely, it helped her focus. It was a grounding sensation. It reminded her that this wasn't a board meeting or a negotiation over stock prices. This was physical. This was war. Jessica returned with the satellite handset, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Here you go, Ms. Vance. I unlocked the line." "Thank you, Jessica," Nia said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. "Go back to the galley. Close the curtain. I don't want you in the crossfire of what happens next." Jessica nodded, tears welling in her eyes, and retreated. Nia dialed a number from memory. It wasn't the customer service line. It wasn't even the corporate headquarters main switchboard. It was the direct, encrypted private line to David Thorne's home office in the Hamptons. It was 2 a.m. in New York, but Nia knew David. He never slept when a merger was looming. The line rang twice. "This is Thorne," a gravelly, tired voice answered. "David," Nia said. There was a pause on the other end. The rustle of papers stopped. "Nia, is that you? You sound different. Are you in London yet? The board meeting for the merger is in 8 hours. I'm not in London, David. I'm currently somewhere over the Atlantic at 35,000 feet on Flight 880. Okay?" David sounded confused. "Is there a problem with the Wi-Fi? Why are you calling on the SAT line?" "David, listen to me very carefully," Nia said, staring at the closed cockpit door at the front of the cabin. "I need you to pull the personnel file for a Captain Richard Sterling." "Sterling? He's one of our senior pilots. Why?" "Nia, what is going on?" Nia took a deep breath. She lowered the ice pack. "David, 10 minutes ago, Captain Sterling accused me of stealing a laptop because he didn't believe I could afford a first-class ticket. When I refused to hand over my property, he tried to physically take it. When I pulled away, your captain slapped me across the face." The silence on the other end of the line was absolute. It stretched for 5 seconds, 10 seconds. He did what?" David's voice was a whisper of disbelief. "He slapped me, David. Hard. I'm bleeding. I have a concussion. And he is currently in the cockpit, diverting the plane to have me arrested for assaulting a flight crew member." Jesus Christ. The sound of a chair scraping back violently echoed down the line. "Nia, are you safe? Is he still near you?" "He's locked in the cockpit. But David, here is the situation. I am the majority shareholder of this airline. I own 51% of the voting stock as of this morning's closing bell, a fact you and I were going to announce in London. That means technically, I am his employer. Actually, I am your employer. Nia, I know who you are. God, I am so sorry. I don't want an apology, David." Nia cut him off, her voice turning to steel. "I want his career. I want his pension. I want him to leave this plane in handcuffs, and I want him to know exactly who ended him before his feet touched the ground." "Done?" David said. The tiredness was gone from his voice, replaced by the ruthlessness of a CEO in damage control mode. "I am patching into the flight deck communications right now. I'm overriding the comms. Nia, stay in your seat. Do not engage him again. I'm going to bring the hammer down." Nia hung up the phone. She handed it back to a trembling Jessica who had peeked through the curtain. Is everything okay?" Jessica whispered. "No," Nia said, leaning back and closing her eyes. "But it's about to get much worse for someone else." Meanwhile, inside the cockpit, the atmosphere was toxic. Captain Sterling sat in the left seat, staring out into the darkness. His hands were gripping the yoke so tight his knuckles were white, even though the autopilot was engaged. First Officer Marcus Hayes, a younger pilot with only 2 years on the 777 fleet, looked at Sterling with wide, fearful eyes. He had heard the slap. He had heard the scream. "Captain," Marcus ventured cautiously, "maybe we should talk to the passenger again. De-escalate. Diverting to Gander is going to cost the airline $50,000 in fuel and fees. If she sues—" "She won't sue," Sterling snapped. "She's a nobody, a scammer, probably forged that boarding pass. Did you see her? Hoodies in first class? It's disrespectful. I did what I had to do to maintain order. She assaulted me first. She spilled water on your pants, sir, Marcus said quietly. That's hardly assault. It's assault if I say it is, Sterling roared, turning to face his co-pilot. I am the commander of this vessel. Do not question me, Hayes, or I'll write you up for insubordination. So fast you'll be flying cargo Cessnas in Alaska for the rest of your miserable life. Marcus shut his mouth, turning back to his instruments. But his stomach was churning. He knew what he had heard. That wasn't a scuffle. That was a hit. And he knew that in the age of smartphones, someone back there had recorded it. Sterling was digging a grave, and Marcus just prayed he wouldn't be buried in it too. Suddenly, the ACARS, Aircraft Communications Addressing and Reporting System, printer in the center console, whirred to life. A strip of paper began to feed out. Sterling glanced at it. Probably dispatch asking why we're turning. I'll handle it. He ripped the paper off. He expected a standard query about the flight path vector. Instead, the message was in all caps. From CEO David Thorne. Priority. Critical to flight deck MA-880. Message. Maintain current course to London. Do not divert. Accept incoming SAT voice call immediately. Sterling, you are to comply or face immediate federal prosecution. Sterling stared at the paper. The color drained from his face, leaving it a sickly gray. What the hell? Before he could process it, the SATCOM channel lit up. A specific code was flashing on the radio panel. It wasn't air traffic control. It was the company frequency. Answer it, Marcus said, his voice trembling but firm. He saw the message, too. Sterling's hand shook as he reached for the radio switch. He toggled it. MA-880. Captain Sterling reading, he said, trying to sound authoritative, though his throat felt dry as sand. The voice that filled the headset wasn't a dispatcher. It was David Thorne, and he sounded like an executioner. Richard Sterling. David Thorne's voice boomed through the noise-cancelling headsets of both pilots. The audio quality was crisp, carrying every ounce of the CEO's fury. This is David Thorne. Do you know who I am? Sterling swallowed hard. Yes, Mr. Thorne. Sir, we have a situation on board. I have an unruly passenger in first class who— Shut up, Thorne interrupted. The command was so abrupt it made Sterling flinch. I didn't call to hear your lies, Richard. I called to give you an order. You are to unlock the cockpit door immediately. Sir. Sterling blinked, confused. Protocol states that— I don't care about protocol right now, Thorne shouted. You assaulted a passenger, and not just any passenger. You just physically assaulted the majority shareholder of Billionaire. The woman you slapped is Nia Vance. She owns the plane you are sitting in. She pays your salary. She is the reason this airline didn't fold last month. The silence in the cockpit was absolute. The hum of the engine seemed to fade away. Sterling felt the blood rush from his head. His vision blurred at the edges. The girl in the hoodie? The one with the cheap sneakers? A billionaire? That's impossible, Sterling stammered, his voice weak. She looks like your boss, Thorne hissed. And right now, she is your judge, jury, and executioner. Now listen to me closely. You are relieved of command, effective immediately. Sterling gasped. You can't do that mid-flight. I am the captain. Not anymore, Thorne said. First Officer Hayes, are you on the line? Marcus Hayes pressed his push-to-talk button, sitting up straighter. Yes, Mr. Thorne, I'm here. Hayes, I am formally deputizing you as the acting pilot in command. Do you have the relief captain on board?" "Yes, sir. Captain Miller is in the crew rest bunk." "Wake him up," Thorne ordered. "Captain Miller will take the left seat. Hayes, you will remain as first officer. Richard Sterling is to be removed from the flight deck immediately. He is to be escorted to the galley, stripped of his epaulets, and he is to sit in the jump seat for the remainder of the flight. If he resists, you have my authorization to restrain him with zip ties." Sterling looked at Hayes. For the first time in his career, he saw no respect in the first officer's eyes. He saw only disgust. "Sir," Sterling pleaded into the mic, desperation creeping in. "Mr. Thorne, please. It was a misunderstanding. She provoked me. I didn't know who she was. If I had known—" "That is exactly the problem, Richard," Thorne said, his voice dropping to a terrifyingly quiet level. "If you had known she was rich, you would have treated her with respect. But because you thought she was powerless, you treated her like garbage. That tells me everything I need to know about your character. You are a liability to my company and a disgrace to the uniform. Get out of that seat. Now." The line clicked dead. Sterling sat frozen, his career of 30 years, his reputation, his pension, gone in the span of a 3-minute phone call. Marcus Hayes removed his headset. He turned to Sterling. His face was hard. "Get up, Richard," Marcus said. He didn't say captain. "You heard the man." "Marcus, you can't be serious," Sterling whispered. "You're going to let them do this to me? Over a slap?" "Over assault," Marcus corrected. He unbuckled his harness and stood up. He walked to the door and unlocked it. He poked his head out and signaled to the flight attendant in the forward galley. "Wake up Captain Miller. Tell him to get to the flight deck immediately, and bring the zip ties just in case." Sterling slowly unbuckled. His hands were shaking so uncontrollably he couldn't get the clasp open at first. When he finally stood up, he felt small. The cockpit, usually his kingdom, felt like a cage. He walked out of the flight deck. The first-class cabin was quiet. Captain Miller, a burly man with a confused expression, squeezed past him into the cockpit. Sterling stood in the forward galley. Jessica was there, along with the purser, a stern woman named Eleanor. "The CEO called us," Eleanor said coldly. "He gave us instructions." She reached out and physically ripped the Velcro epaulets with the 4 gold stripes off Sterling's shoulders. The sound of the tearing fabric was loud in the quiet galley. She dropped them into the trash bin. "Take the jump seat." Elena pointed to the fold-down seat near the door, the most uncomfortable seat on the plane, usually reserved for junior crew during takeoff. But Sterling didn't sit. He looked past the curtain. He could see seat 1A. He saw Nia Vance. She had put her glasses back on, though they sat crookedly on her bruised face. She was typing on her laptop again, as if nothing had happened. Sterling felt a surge of irrational anger. It was her fault. She had tricked him. She had set him up. He pushed past Eleanor. "Richard, stop!" Eleanor shouted. Sterling stumbled into the first-class aisle. He wasn't going to hit her again. He just wanted to scream at her. He wanted her to acknowledge that she had ruined him. "You set me up!" Sterling yelled, his voice cracking. "You came on here dressed like that on purpose. You wanted this to happen." Nia stopped typing. She didn't look up immediately. She finished a sentence, hit save, and then slowly turned her head. The entire cabin watched. Lord Harrington lowered his magazine. A tech CEO in 2A took off his headphones. Nia looked at Sterling, a man now stripped of his rank, his dignity, and his power. He looked pathetic, a silver-haired bully throwing a tantrum. "I dressed for comfort, Mr. Sterling," Nia said calmly. "You dressed for authority. The difference is, I don't need a uniform to command respect. And you? Without yours, you're just a sad, angry old man." "I was the best pilot in this fleet," Sterling shouted, tears of rage pricking his eyes. "You were a bus driver with a god complex," Nia countered mercilessly. "And you just crashed." She looked at Eleanor, who had rushed up behind him. "Get him out of my sight. He's disturbing the other passengers." Elena and another male flight attendant grabbed Sterling by the arms. He didn't fight them. The fight had left him. He sagged, letting them drag him back to the galley like a sack of unwanted mail. As the curtain swished closed, cutting him off from the world of luxury he used to rule, the first-class cabin erupted, not in cheers, but in applause. Lord Harrington clapped first, then the tech CEO, then the others. It was a slow, steady applause of approval. Nia didn't smile. She just picked up her water, took a sip, and went back to work. But inside, the fire of justice was burning brighter than ever. She wasn't done. The pilot was just the symptom. She was going to cure the disease rotting the entire airline. The descent into London Heathrow was smooth, a stark contrast to the turbulence inside the cabin. Captain Miller, the relief pilot, greased the landing, putting the massive Boeing 737 on the tarmac with barely a bump. As the plane taxied to the gate, the fasten seatbelt sign dinged off. Usually, this was the cue for the chaotic rush of passengers standing up to grab their bags. But today, the intercom crackled to life with a message that froze everyone in their tracks. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Acting Captain Hayes." Marcus's voice was firm. "Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have authorities boarding the aircraft to deal with a security incident. No one is to stand up until the officers have cleared the cabin. Thank you for your patience." In the galley, Richard Sterling sat slumped in the jump seat. The fight had drained out of him, replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He watched through the small porthole window as the jet bridge connected. He saw the flashing blue lights of police cruisers on the tarmac below. "They're actually doing it," he thought, a wave of nausea hitting him. "They're treating me like a terrorist." The cabin door opened. The cool, damp English air rushed in. 3 officers from the Metropolitan Police boarded, their high-visibility jackets stark against the muted tones of the airplane interior. They were led by a tall sergeant with a grim expression. Elena, the purser, pointed silently to the jump seat. "Richard Sterling?" the sergeant asked, stepping into the galley. Sterling looked up. He tried to muster some shred of his old authority. "Officer, this is a massive misunderstanding. I am the captain of this—" "Stand up, please," the sergeant interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "You are under arrest for common assault and endangering the safety of an aircraft." "Endangering?" Sterling spluttered as he stood up. The officers immediately grabbed his wrists, twisting them behind his back. The click of handcuffs echoed through the silent plane. "I didn't endanger anyone. I was disciplining a disruptive passenger. We have witness statements and video evidence sent ahead by the airline," the sergeant said, reciting the caution. "You do not have to say anything, but it may harm your defense if you do not mention, when questioned, something which you later rely on in court." They marched him out. Not through a back door. They marched him right through the first-class cabin. Sterling walked the gauntlet. He passed the passengers he had sworn to protect, now looking at him with mixture of pity and disdain. As he reached row 1, the officers paused to let a ground crew member pass. Sterling found himself standing right next to seat 1A. Nia was standing now, pulling on her backpack. She looked fresh, composed, despite the ugly bruise blooming on her cheekbone. She didn't look at him with anger. She looked at him with the detachment of a scientist examining a bug under a microscope. "I gave 30 years to this company," Sterling whispered at her, his voice trembling. "You destroyed my life in 7 hours." Nia turned to face him fully. "You destroyed it the moment you decided my dignity was worth less than your ego. Enjoy retirement, Mr. Sterling. I hear the prison library has a great selection." The officers shoved him forward. "Move it!" Sterling was led off the plane, his head bowed, the flashes of paparazzi cameras greeting him at the end of the jet bridge. Nia waited until he was gone. Then she walked to the door. Standing there was a different kind of reception committee, a line of men and women in sharp suits, led by the Meridian Air Station manager for London. They looked terrified. "Miss Vance," the manager said, bowing slightly. "On behalf of the entire London team, we are mortified. We have a private car waiting on the tarmac. Your luggage has already been retrieved. We have a doctor on standby at the Dorchester Hotel to examine your injury." Nia adjusted her hoodie. "Thank you. But first, I need you to do something for me." "Anything, Mom." "The flight crew," Nia said, gesturing to Jessica, Elena, and Marcus Hayes, who were standing nervously by the cockpit door. "They acted with integrity under impossible pressure. I want them all given a week's paid leave, immediately. And put a commendation in Marcus Hayes's file. He's the kind of pilot I want flying my planes." Jessica let out a sob of relief. Marcus nodded, a look of profound gratitude on his face. "Consider it done," the manager said. Nia walked out onto the jet bridge, the cold London air biting her face. She pulled her phone out. It was buzzing with notifications. The video was already out. By the time Nia reached her suite at the Dorchester, the incident was the #1 trending topic on X, formerly Twitter, and TikTok. A passenger in 2B, a teenage influencer, had recorded the entire confrontation. The video was titled, "Pilot Slaps Girl in Hoodie, Wait for the Ending." It had 14 million views in 4 hours. The video was damning. It showed Sterling looming over Nia. It showed his sneering face. It captured the crisp, sickening sound of the slap. And crucially, it captured Nia's calm, steel-spined reaction and the reveal of the black card. The internet was out for blood. The hashtag #NoBoycottMeridian was competing with Sergio's Justice for Nia. Nia sat on the velvet sofa, an ice pack on her face, watching the news on the TV. "Breaking news," the BBC anchor announced. "Meridian Air shares have taken a turbulent dive this morning, following a shocking incident aboard a transatlantic flight. However, in a bizarre twist, the stock is rallying after hours. As it was revealed, the victim of the assault is none other than Nia Vance, the elusive, silent backer who recently acquired majority control of the airline." Nia picked up her phone. She dialed David Thorne. "Is it done?" she asked without preamble. "It's a bloodbath, Nia." David sounded exhausted, but exhilarated. "The video is everywhere. We released a statement condemning Sterling. He's been fired with cause, meaning no severance, no benefits. The union isn't even fighting it. They don't want to touch him with a 10-foot pole." "Good. What about the rest?" "I've called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow morning. They're scared, Nia. They think you're going to clean house." "I am," Nia said. Sterling wasn't an anomaly, David. He was a symptom of a culture that values status over people. He thought he could abuse me because I looked poor. How many economy passengers have been treated like dirt by your staff? How many complaints were ignored because the victims weren't billionaires? I don't know, David admitted. Find out, Nia commanded. I want a full audit of all passenger complaints involving discrimination from the last 5 years on my desk by Monday. And David, I'm coming to that board meeting tomorrow, in person. Understood. Do you want me to send a stylist? For the press? Nia touched her bruise. It was turning a deep shade of purple. No, I want them to see this. I want the board to see exactly what their culture produced. The next morning, the Meridian Air headquarters in London was besieged by press. Cameras flashed like lightning storms as limousines dropped off the board members, old men in grey suits who looked like they were walking to a funeral. Then, a black Range Rover pulled up. Nia Vance stepped out. She wasn't wearing a power suit. She was wearing clean black jeans, a white t-shirt, and a blazer. And on her face, she wore the bruise like a badge of honor. She wore no sunglasses to hide it. The reporters shouted questions. "Ms. Vance, will you sell the airline? Ms. Vance, are you suing Captain Sterling? Nia, look this way." Nia stopped at the top of the stairs. She turned to the microphones. The crowd went silent. "I bought this airline to save it," Nia said, her voice clear and projecting without a microphone. "But yesterday, I learned that money can't fix a rotten foundation. Captain Sterling thought he was slapping a nobody. He thought his uniform gave him the right to judge a person's worth. He was wrong." She looked directly into the camera lens, her gaze piercing. To every passenger who has ever been belittled, ignored, or mistreated by a corporation because they didn't look the part, this is for you. Meridian Air is under new management. And starting today, the only thing we will judge is the quality of our service, not the clothes on your back. She turned and walked into the building. Inside the boardroom, 12 men sat around a long mahogany table. When Nia walked in, they all stood up instantly. It was a reflex of fear. She didn't sit. She threw a file onto the table. It slid across the polished wood and stopped in front of the chairman. "That is Captain Sterling's personnel file," Nia said. He had 12 prior complaints for aggressive behavior, 3 for racial bias. And yet, he was promoted to senior captain. Why? Silence. "Because he was one of the boys?" Nia asked softly. "Because he saved fuel? Because he was on time?" She leaned her hands on the table. "You protected a bully because he was profitable. Well, he just cost you $40 million in market cap in one day. The era of the old boys club at Meridian Air is over. I am dissolving this board. Every single one of you is under review." The chairman sputtered. You can't do that. We have contracts." "I have 51%, Nia smiled, and it was the most dangerous smile they had ever seen. "I can do whatever I want, and right now, what I want is fresh air." The Central Criminal Court of England and Wales, known to the world simply as the Old Bailey, stood like a stone fortress against the grey London sky. It was a place where history's most notorious villains had met their fate, and today the cobblestones outside were choked with media vans, satellite trucks, and a sea of cameras. The trial of the Crown versus Richard Sterling had become more than a legal proceeding. It was a cultural flashpoint. It wasn't just about a slap anymore. It was about the old guard versus the new world, about arrogance versus accountability. Inside courtroom number 1, the atmosphere was heavy, smelling of damp wool, floor wax, and nervous sweat. The gallery was packed to capacity. Former flight attendants, ground crew members, and even passengers who had suffered under Sterling's tyranny in the past had gathered to see if the untouchable captain would finally touch the ground. In the front row of the public gallery sat Nia Vance. She looked nothing like the girl in the hoodie who had boarded Flight 880 6 months ago. Today, she wore a tailored, midnight blue suit that screamed quiet power. Her hair was sharp, her posture rigid. Beside her sat David Thorne, the CEO, who looked more like her bodyguard than her boss. In the dock, enclosed by thick glass, sat Richard Sterling. The transformation was shocking. The man who had once worn his uniform like a suit of armor now wore a cheap, ill-fitting grey suit. His silver hair, usually gelled to aerodynamic perfection, was thinning and wispy. His face was gaunt, the skin sagging around his jawline. He didn't look like a commander of the skies. He looked like a frightened, aging man who had lost his way. The prosecutor, a razor-sharp woman named Barrister Caldwell, stood to deliver her closing statement. She didn't shout. She didn't need to. She simply walked over to the large screen facing the jury. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Caldwell began, her voice echoing in the silence. "The defense has tried to paint Mr. Sterling as a decorated veteran of the skies. They claim he was under immense stress. They claim he perceived a security threat. But I ask you to look at the evidence one last time." She pressed a button. The video played. Whack! The sound of the slap filled the courtroom. It was wet, sharp, and violent. On the screen, Sterling's face was twisted in a rictus of hate. "You little—" Caldwell paused the video on Sterling's face. "That is not fear," Caldwell said, pointing at the screen. "That is not a man concerned for the safety of his aircraft. That is a man who was offended that a young black woman dared to occupy a space he believed belonged to him. He didn't check her ticket because of safety. He checked it because of ego. And when his ego was challenged, he resorted to violence." She turned to Sterling, who stared down at his hands. "He assaulted a passenger. He abandoned his post in the cockpit. He terrorized his crew. If this man is a hero, then the word has lost all meaning." Caldwell sat down. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sterling's defense attorney, a weary-looking man named Mr. Finch, stood up half-heartedly. "My client apologizes for his lapse in judgment. He has lost his job. He has been publicly shamed. We ask for a suspended sentence. He is 60 years old. Prison would destroy him." Justice Eleanor Prentice, a woman with eyes like flint and a reputation for absolute intolerance of bullying, adjusted her red robes. She looked over her spectacles at Sterling. "Richard Sterling, please stand." Sterling stood. His legs shook so visibly that the vibration rattled the wooden railing of the dock. "You have been found guilty of assault by beating and endangering the safety of an aircraft," Justice Prentice read from the paper in front of her. "I have read the victim impact statement from Ms. Vance. I have also read the statements from your former co-pilot, Mr. Hayes, and the flight crew. They paint a picture of a man who ruled through fear." Sterling opened his mouth, perhaps to beg, but the judge held up a hand. "You were a captain," she continued, her voice dropping an octave, becoming more dangerous. "A captain is a father figure to the vessel. You are supposed to be the calm in the storm. Instead, you were the storm. You struck a woman who was sitting peacefully in her seat. You did it because you thought she was powerless. You thought she was riff-raff, to use your own words. The judge leaned forward. You gambled on her silence. You lost. Sterling gripped the glass partition. "I gave 30 years, he rasped, tears leaking from his eyes. "I flew through hurricanes. I saved lives." "And you threw it all away in 30 seconds, Justice Prentice countered, cold as ice. "Mr. Sterling, the aviation industry requires trust. You have shattered it. Therefore, the sentence of this court must be a deterrent." She picked up her gavel. "For the count of assault, I sentence you to 6 months. For the count of endangering an aircraft, I sentence you to 2 years. These sentences will run consecutively. You will serve 2 years and 6 months in immediate custody." A gasp rippled through the courtroom. Sterling's knees buckled. He grabbed the ledge to keep from collapsing. 2.5 years. He would be an old man when he got out. "Furthermore," the judge wasn't finished, "I am forwarding a recommendation to the Civil Aviation Authority. You are hereby permanently disqualified from holding a pilot's license. You will never fly a commercial aircraft again. Not a jet, not a cargo plane, not a glider. Your wings are clipped, Mr. Sterling. Take him down." The finality of the words hit Sterling like a physical blow. The loss of freedom was one thing. The loss of his identity was the death knell. He wasn't Captain Sterling anymore. He was Inmate Sterling. 2 burly dock officers stepped forward. They didn't handle him with the reverence crew members once did. One grabbed his shoulder, the other his wrist. "Come on, let's go," the officer grunted. As they turned him toward the stairs that led to the cells below, Sterling looked desperately into the gallery. He locked eyes with Nia. He didn't scream this time. He didn't blame her. In that final moment, looking into her calm, dark eyes, he realized the magnitude of his mistake. He saw the strength he had mistaken for weakness. He saw the dignity he had tried to slap away. He slumped, his spirit breaking audibly in a sob, and allowed himself to be dragged into the darkness of the stairwell. The heavy door slammed shut behind him with a sound like a gunshot. Nia didn't smile. She didn't cheer. She simply closed her eyes for a second, exhaling a breath she felt she had been holding for 6 months. "Are you okay?" David Thorne whispered. Nia opened her eyes. They were clear. "I'm better than okay, David. I'm ready." They exited the courtroom into the blinding flash of paparazzi bulbs. The questions came screaming at them. "Ms. Vance, do you feel justice was served?" "Nia, what's next for Billionaire? Did you see him cry?" Nia stopped at the top of the stone steps. She raised a hand, and the chaotic sea of reporters fell silent. She approached the bank of microphones. "Today, the law recognized something that Richard Sterling ignored," Nia said, her voice steady and projecting across the crowd. "That dignity is not a luxury class item. It doesn't come with a ticket price. It is a fundamental right." She looked at the cameras, addressing the millions watching on the news and social media. Richard Sterling lost his freedom today, but he lost his career the moment he decided to judge a passenger by their appearance rather than their character. Let this be a message to every corporation, every manager, and every person in power. The era of the bully is over. At the new Billionaire, we don't look down on anyone unless we're at 35,000 feet. She turned away from the mics, signaling the end of the press conference. As she walked toward her waiting car, she pulled out her phone. She opened the company app. The stock price was up another 4% since the verdict was read. But more importantly, she opened an email from Marcus Hayes, the young co-pilot who had taken over that day. Subject: Thank you. Message: Ms. Vance, just wanted to let you know. We just landed in Tokyo. The crew is happy. The passengers are happy. And for the first time in years, I love this job. Thank you for giving us our wings back. Nia smiled, a genuine warm smile. She got into the back of the car. Where to, Ms. Vance? The driver asked. The airport, Nia said, looking out the window as the London skyline drifted by. I have a flight to catch, and this time I think I'll sit in the cockpit. The car merged into the traffic, driving toward a horizon that was finally, completely clear. And that is the story of how one arrogant mistake cost a captain his entire life. It's a powerful reminder that respect shouldn't have a price tag, and you should never, ever judge a book by its cover, because you never know who is really holding the pen. Nia Vance didn't just win a lawsuit. She changed an entire culture, proving that true power isn't about how loud you can yell, but about how hard you can fight for what's right. Richard Sterling learned the hard way that when you try to fly above the rules, the crash landing is always brutal. Wow, what a journey. I hope you guys enjoyed this roller coaster of drama, justice, and karma. If you felt satisfied seeing Sterling get what he deserved, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And I want to know your thoughts. Have you ever been judged by someone because of how you looked or what you were wearing? Let me know your story in the comments down below. I read every single one. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss a new story. We have plenty more tales of revenge, karma, and hidden identities coming your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.